So yeah, welcome to the Q&A. We're going to spotlight some cool things and projects that are happening in the community, get your questions answered. We are here as members of the OpenJS World Program Committee and involved in the foundation overall. And let's see, let me share with you some of the details to kind of get us started. If you have any questions or want to engage with us in any way, please feel free to tweet at the OpenJSF Twitter handle, and we would be happy to bring in your questions and address them on the air. Cool. So the CFP is open. The call for proposals, call for speakers is open, and it closes on the 14th, I believe, which is a couple of weeks. Sometimes we extend that, but let's shoot for that date. And the event itself is in June. It's June 6th through the 10th, and it's at the JW Marriott in Austin, Texas, here in the US. We're going to be co-locating with the CD Foundation and the GraphQL Foundation, as well as the TC39 meetings, which are that's the group that works on the language JavaScript as a part of the ECMAScript organization. So it's going to be an amazing week. We have like a full week happening. I'll run through what that's going to look like. Day 0, of course, this is a zero index based event, is going to be like trainings, Node.js trainings, native script trainings, perhaps other trainings as well. Day 1 and 2 are going to be, talks and kind of the meat of the conference. And then Thursday and Friday, we are doing collaboration summits. This kind of started as a Node.js thing, that term at the very least, but as we merged the foundations together and really kind of broadened the stuff that we were focused on, the wonderful kind of add-on benefit of that is that we had more people involved in the collaboration summits, more cross-project involvement, more involvement from standards and project development. So it's been really great. I'm super excited to do that again in person, assuming all goes well and the world isn't on fire. And then also, as I mentioned, TC39 meetings are going to be happening that week as well. I believe it's Monday through Thursday, if I'm correct. So lots of stuff happening. It's going to be a really full week, and I'm excited for that to happen. A couple of keynotes that I'll mention that we very recently announced and that we're excited to have. Brian Bellendorf, Executive Director of the OpenSSF, Open Source Security Foundation. Matteo Collina, who's works on Fastify and has been a part of Node.tsc for many years. Cory Doctorow, who's an internet sensation. Rachel Neighbors, Maggie Johnson-Pite, Robin Ginn, the ED of the foundation. So we got a bunch of people that we are super excited about. And lots of fun built in to connect and fun activities as well. We're gonna do lots of fun stuff. And then also I'll mention too, we're trying to do everything that we can to make it a great event for everyone involved. So we have things like free childcare will be available, and a nursing room and things like that. So I'm super excited about in-person events. So yeah, this is very exciting. Anyway, so that's all kind of the housekeeping, all the logistics and stuff up front. Got to get that out of the way, and now we can get into our lovely conversation here. And we thought that maybe we would start by talking about maybe what's the first talk you ever gave, or how'd you sort of get into this sort of conferences and whatnots, and what did you learn? Were you nervous? how did you overcome these kinds of things? How did you get to where you are now, or perhaps you're comfortable speaking? I don't know. I still get nervous, but I don't know. I'll turn it over to you, Beth. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So actually, interesting fact, my first ever conference I ever went to was just after I started my kind of first job out of university, which was actually Node.js Interactive in Austin, Texas. So it's going to be really nice going back, hopefully this year, to the place where my first ever conference was, because at the time I was like fresh into my career, looking around, seeing these people speak. Quite surprising that probably a few years later that I was possibly up on stage presenting. And how I got into speaking was kind of through the open source community. Saw a lot of the other members talking, wanted to get involved myself. And I actually did like a training event where you'd go up, give a 5-minute lightning talk, and step down, you get some feedback, and then you go up again and give the talk again to track your improvement. And that was actually a really good icebreaker for me to get into speaking, because, you know, at some point you've just got to do it. You've just got to go up on stage. There's only so much practicing in front of a screen or what have you, or doing it virtual. The feeling going up on stage is completely different. And I think at some point you've just got to say, yeah, I'm going to give it a go.
Yeah, those I encourage folks, if you have the opportunity to get into those sorts of organizations that help you to develop your speaking. I did that at the New York Times. It's a thing called Toastmasters, and I have to admit I didn't actually get up and talk, but I did go and I listened and I paid attention, and I was still too nervous to actually talk. But it was shortly after that I got involved, you know, in speaking and whatnot. How about you, Daniel?
Yeah, so I kind of ramped up really quickly from my first tech conference to speaking. I think the first tech conference I ever went to was, I originally started out in the PHP community. So my first tech conference ever was ZenCon in 2008. And then in 2009, I was up on one of the side rooms at the end of the day, on the last day, giving a talk on, what was it? I think it was automated deployment with Thing, which was an XML-based, if you ever used Ant in any of the Java world, you would recognize Thing pretty well. It was an interesting ramp up to kind of go from 0 to 100 on the speaking. And I remember getting up, giving my first talk. I was nervous. Earlier in the day in the speaker's room, I had met a bunch of people that I only either knew of either through IRC or just like literally they were on some of the tech books that I had ordered. And here I am giving a talk, and I have 45 minutes, and I just remember blowing through it in about 20 minutes, just motor mouthing my way through. But it didn't stop me. I had kind of been speaking at conferences almost yearly up until the last couple of years for obvious reasons, and then digging into organizing and all of that. And it's, you know, running meetups and other conferences, just something it turns out that I really, really, really like. And I think if you go back and ask my parents, you know, whenever I was in high school, like, oh, do you think your son would be into public speaking? Like, absolutely not. That sounds like something I would bet against. So
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I know I actually saw this shirt this morning, and I put it on because I think this is one of the first events that I had been to that you know, really got me excited about the community. And like this one in particular, if I remember correctly, was in sort of a small venue, and there were just tables, and everybody seemed to be friends, but some of them were going up and speaking, and it just seemed like this great place that you want to just hang out and be a part of. And so I think that was one of the things that got me excited about you know, speaking and sharing and stuff. And so I applied for Cascadia JS. I think this was in 2013. And I got accepted, and then realized that they put me right before Tom Dale, who I was like, oh my God, he's a fantastic speaker and, you know, so smart. And I was like, you know, why did they put me there? And then Jen Turner was after Tom, who I didn't know at the time, but her talk was amazing. And you know, I'm just such a big fan of hers. But I remember giving that talk and being so nervous. I actually practiced it at a New York City meetup, and I was talking about things, and Dom DiNicola was in the audience, and he kept correcting me. So I got some tips before I went up there, but I was doing well. But I remember pausing for a moment and thinking to myself, like, your nerves, like, calm down, you know, don't just calm down, you're doing okay. And I can see it in the talk, like I paused for a minute. But anyway, I was super nervous, and I continue to be nervous every time I talk, even though I've, you know, done it how many times. Do either of you still get nervous, or how do you manage that?
oh, yeah, I definitely still get nervous. You know, I'm always I'm trying out new talks. I try not to repeat the same thing. So I'm always nervous giving a new talk. I usually For me, my coping mechanism is I put on some headphones and I kind of hype myself up off the side of the stage, and I just kind of reach a point where I'm just like, you know what, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm gonna go, I'm gonna talk, it's gonna bomb, I don't care. I'm just gonna get it over with, go up on stage, get it over with, and then I basically spend after my talk, I was like, I get done, adrenaline wears off, and the next however many minutes in free fall until the first person comes up and talks to me about it. So it's still nerve-wracking.
Yeah, yeah. What about you, Beth?
Yeah, 100% still get nervous, and still I'm definitely not one of those people who can craft a talk like the night before and be okay to go up and give it. I'm definitely one of those who has to, a few weeks in advance, create the slides every day or so, just skim through them, make sure I know the content. That's just my way of kind of tackling the nerves, because I feel like if I'm very prepared and I know the content, that's the only way I can kind of combat some of the nerves. So yeah, that's the main thing I do.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up. And I'll admit, like, I've been playing music since I was young, and every time we get up on stage, I'm still nervous, even if it's a crowd full of my friends or whatever, So I don't know, maybe some people, the nerves don't go away, but most people I talk to, the nerves, even if they're really experienced. But that's an interesting thing you bring up, Beth. Like, I'm one of those people that, maybe a combination of procrastination, but also just like always working on things, that like my talk, I may be sitting at a table waiting to go on stage and still like making changes to my slides and ideas and jokes and slides, GIFs or whatever. But Beth, you're the kind of person who gets it way done early, rehearses it, and feels really prepared.
Yeah, just mainly the content, getting the content down, getting familiar with it and running through it. Actually, in recent talks, because I found that can extend too far in advance, I've tried to say, look, I'm only going to start the slides 2 weeks before the event. Otherwise, like, the amount of time you're dedicating to it can just get out of hand. And one other thing, because I'm always thinking about the talk and the lead up to the event, one thing I find really helps is when I'm earlier on in the conference. For example, like one of the earlier speaking slots, morning kind of times. And actually, if anyone does feel like that as well, I've found that a lot of conferences will be open to, like, if you message them and say, hey, I kind of obsess over my talk a bit, would you mind putting me in an earlier slot so I can enjoy the rest of the conference? A lot of conference committees are really open to that. So just chat to the folks about, what makes you comfortable if you're have any, nervousness like that.
Yeah. Dan?
And just to echo the point, I've run quite a few conferences and I received quite a few requests like, hey, listen, like, I'm not good with mornings, can you give me an afternoon? Hey, I'd prefer to have an earlier, yada yada yada. Like, it, obviously the earlier we get it, the easier it is to bake into the schedule. But yeah, if we're talking about kind of like the preparation and stuff, I'm kind of a bit of the opposite. I don't have, like, I get nervous when I have to memorize stuff. Like, I'm really, really, really bad at forcing myself to memorize things. I remember I had a business law, my intro to business law course in college was just, it was mostly memorization. And like, I, loved that class, but squeaked by the skin of my teeth. So I find for me, like, I start like an outline of the slides way early, and then I just kind of like slowly add on. And what I found is I'm constantly talking about my talk topic with my friends, or if I'm at a meetup, if I'm talking to somebody random, I'll bring it up. And I kind of use that to refine the ideas. So I kind of do a little bit of, like, when I'm on stage, I'm mostly improving off of notes, but it's mainly because the times that I've tried to pre-write a script and memorize it, I'm so much more nervous because then, like, oh, I forgot these 3 words, and then I start beating myself up. So I found for me just kind of easing into the flow, making sure that I have my bullet points so I touch on them, but the rest is just filler. And I feel much more comfortable when I work off of like bullets and riff on filler.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that I kind of do a combination of those things. Like I think I try to write a script, but then I usually abandon it. But it helps me to work through the whole thing and pull out bullet points and get a narrative. But I think that yeah, I try to like write what I'm going to say. I try to read what I'm going to say, but then I think usually in the end, I kind of abandon it, but I at least going through it, I know what I want to talk about.
Yeah, I'm kind of a mixture. Like the first time I look through the content, I may like craft a bit of a script so I can kind of figure out, you know, how to fill the 25 minutes and what I'm going to say. But then in terms of the speaker notes, I'm very careful to go back and turn them into bullet point list because I don't want to be relying on them too much, because I have done that before. If I've got too much in there, you kind of rely on it and speak to it kind of word to word. And sometimes I personally feel that can impact the fluidity of the talk. So yeah, I try to convert it back into bullet points so I can improvise, and that's kind of nice because it means each time you give the talk it's slightly different, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah, and I think when it comes out natural like that too, it's just more engaging. And I think that that's become even more obvious as we've gone to like virtual stuff. You know, if somebody's just sitting there reading something, you know, it's a little less interesting, I guess I'd say. But when you can really kind of just talk the content, you know, it's a more engaging experience. Cool. Let's see. Let's get into some of the things here. I'm looking at my list here. Let's talk about submissions. Like, would you suggest people submit one talk, two talks, many talks, all their talks? What are your thoughts about like how many talks to submit? Beth?
My gut feel is probably aim for like the 2 to 3 mark, particularly if they're different in topics, because that means you're kind of spanning a wider area. So for example, we might have loads of 12 topics on the same thing, for example, TypeScript. So if you're submitting 2 talks that are suitably different, I think that's quite nice. I wouldn't go for quantity, like submitting like 10 talks, because I think sometimes the value can kind of get lost. And I think generally it's just nice to have, you know, 2 or 3 talks so you can talk about something you're really passionate about or your top interest at the time, but also a bit of variety for the reviewers to pick from.
I agree. Having sat on a couple of speaker selection committees, it's nice to have variety, because sometimes we will come across talk topics that we come across a talk that we really like, but for whatever reason we can't pick that talk, but we're like, you know, this person submitted 1 or 2 more and they seemed really great. We'd like to kind of, you know, invest in them and bring them in. We have that option. And then on the extreme end, you know, when you submit just one, there's obviously like I hope it's amazing because it's just one list. But if you submit 10, I start to ask the question of, okay, do you really have 10 talks? Are they just like the same talk with repackaged a little bit? You know, I'm going to be worried about, you know, as an organizer, I'm going to be worried about, you know, the quality. Are we going to be bringing in, you know, is this going to be a talk that invigorates the attendees, make them think to themselves, I'm really glad I came to this conference? Or is it just going to be another one of those, you know, whatever. So I think, you know, it's one of those, if all you have is one idea, submit one idea. 1 is more than 0. If you've got 2 to 3, I think you should probably go ahead and toss those in. But, you know, you're not going to get points for, it's not like a raffle. You're not significantly improving your odds by buying a bunch of tickets.
Yeah, I was thinking about a raffle or a lottery or something too. If you submit 20 talks, it doesn't mean you're going to get more of a chance. In fact, it may start to work against you. But I know, you know, one of the things that we talked about in the program committee that you know, we work on, for folks who don't know, we meet regularly. Is it weekly? It seems to happen regularly. Talking about the events and you know, all the different aspects of the events. But I know one of the things we talked about was that, you know, we are here to help. You know, if we see a talk that is like, this is interesting, but it doesn't quite fit, and we see a way that it can be improved, that's, you know, we are open to engaging with the speaker to kind of figure out perhaps a better version of the talk or tweaking it a little bit. Like, what are your thoughts about kind of going back to the folks and helping them to work together with the program committee to find a really sweet spot on their talk. What are your thoughts about that, Beth?
Yeah, it's as long as folks know that, you know, your talk or abstract doesn't need to be perfect, like on submission. As long as we can gauge roughly the content and the angle you're aiming for, we can work with you to adjust it slightly. I think it's just letting the applicants know we're open to that. We may suggest a couple of tweaks so it better fits into maybe a different track or something like that.
Yeah, makes sense. Dan?
I've seen great success with this happen before. It happens more often than you think, and the tweaks are mostly along the lines of, like, you know, you might submit a talk about doing AI in TypeScript, and we might go, hey, listen, you know, we love this. You may want to lean more into the AI. We've got a lot of TypeScript talks. Like, is that okay with you? Or in some cases, we're like, I really love this talk description. We really want to have you in there, but, like, you know, there's something like, would you be willing to kind of tweak, just like emphasize a little bit more in the area? So we take the bones of what we see, and it's more just along the lines of, we have insight to the whole schedule. We'll tell you what we're thinking. We'll be like, would you be able to, like, would you feel comfortable? And, you know, I've had some people say, no, I'm more comfortable with this. We go, great. We'll still go ahead with the talk. Like, it's not a, you know, we're going to reject you outright. It's just like, hey, we got some ideas. Would you be willing to run with them? So,
yeah, totally makes sense. And that's great. And it's good to, you know, let people know that, because I think, you know, we want to encourage folks to, you know, first-time speakers and folks who haven't spoken a lot to get involved, and we'd love to hear their voices. So, you know, definitely don't hesitate to reach out or to submit, and you know, we can potentially work with you. I don't know if I talked about this up front, but I should mention that the talks we're expecting to be 30-minute breakout talks. And then I believe we also have the option of like 5-minute lightning talks. So, you know, there are two options there. Lightning talk might be a great way to get involved too. But I wanted to call that out. And then just kind of on the whole thought of like helping folks to craft their talk, I want to make sure that I mentioned that we have a channel in our Slack org that is called CFP-mentorship, you know, so talk proposal mentorship. So we'd be happy to have you come and join. We can talk about ideas there, help you flesh out anything, or just generally, you know, a community to kind of share the things that you know, you're working on in terms of submitting talks. So to get on our Slack, if you go to openjsf.org/collaborate, there's a whole list of ways that you can get involved in the work that we're doing at the foundation. You know, in addition to the inviter for our Slack, our calendar is there, links to our GitHub repos, which is where a lot of our work happens, you know, and GitHub issues and pull requests and meetings and things like that. Yeah, there's a variety of ways to get involved in the work that we do at the foundation there, but particularly for this conversation, join the Slack, join the CFP mentorship channel, and come in and say hi, and you know, we'd be happy to engage with you there. Do we want to take a moment and talk about like diversity goals and what are our thoughts around that and how we can be helpful? Dan, you want to start us there?
yeah, sorry, I had to find my mute button there. But yeah, you know, it's one of those, you know, running a conference, we want to make sure that we've got both a pleasant experience, but as well as good representation. We've got a couple of kind of like line items on our diversity goals that we make sure to keep an eye on. One of them being no all-male panels. We want to make sure that we kind of get really good perspectives from everybody that we have representative in our tech community. We've got some overall goals that we're targeting just to make sure that we have, you know, 25% or greater underrepresented groups within our speakers list. And a lot of this is based off of, we want to get the submissions in. So like, if you're watching this and you're on the fence, please get off the fence, do a submission. If you know somebody who's mentioned that they want to do that, get them to submit, reach out. We have found that direct reach outs from friends and acquaintances is the best way to get a CFP submitted. I know that I've talked to a bunch of my coworkers and a bunch of my friends, and I will continue doing that. So I encourage you to do that. And then the other big thing I want to mention is we've got budget for scholarships. So if you or somebody is sitting on the fence because like, I'd like to speak, I'd like to submit, but I don't know if I can afford the trip to Austin. I don't know if I can, financially handle this. Like, please reach out. We've got scholarships that I know we will be posting more details on. We've got a budget to assist with the speakers that come in. Like, we can't help if we don't know. And so please encourage, like, reach out, let us know, like, hey, I'd really love to give this talk, but, I'm in between jobs, or, I'm helping out. You wouldn't believe the number of times I've talked to speakers in past conferences where they're like, look, I've just got some stuff going on in my life. I'd really like to talk, but this is, a bit of a burden. We can go, great. We can take care of that. We want you to come speak for us. And we know that sometimes when it comes to increasing the diversity and increasing the kinds of people that we have coming to speak for us, sometimes there's a financial aspect. And so we're here to help. And so we do ask that you kind of, you reach out, and we will have that on the OpenJS World website. We'll have that information available. In the worst case scenario, join the Slack that Joe mentioned and ask about it. So.
Yeah, and this community fund is something that we're working on at the foundation, and we want to use in a variety of ways. So kind of outside of just the event, even if you have any needs, please reach out to us. And also, if this is an area of interest for you, that you want to be helpful for, to get involved in the work that we're doing at the foundation and helping us to figure out how to best use this community fund. It's a exciting place to be, trying to work on those sorts of things, to be supportive to the community. And that's something that we've always tried to do with this event. And I think, it's interesting, the JavaScript community is really a fantastic, vibrant, diverse, just really great community. And we want to make sure that we get folks up on the stage that represents that as well.
Yeah, one thing I'd just like to echo is, like, the program committee really does value, diversity, making sure we've got the best lineup possible, the most diverse lineup. And I can kind of speak to, for me, attending my first ever conference and seeing people who are a bit like me on stage, it really makes a difference. Like, you've got to see yourself somehow up on that stage. So it's definitely a key value for our group.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely one of the things we focus on. Kind of it's behind all the things that we're doing. Cool. So let's maybe get into some of the do's and don'ts of submitting a talk. We've got a list of things here that we can go through. I mean, I'll start off by just saying, the kind of the classic one, right? This isn't an opportunity to pitch your product or your company's product. Let's not make this a commercial. I used to work for Strong Loop, and we had this open source thing, and I even felt like sometimes that was a little bit like, it underpins some of the things that we do, but it's an open source project, and I spoke a lot about that. But what are your thoughts, Beth, about no commercial pitch?
Yeah, it's a very delicate line, I think. I think there are ways of, demonstrating a story or showing how you've solved a problem. And maybe it is using a specific product, like maybe a specific cloud or something. But really what we'd want to see in the talk is to focus on, how the problem was solved, how the technology helps that, not actually like just trying to sell the product. So it's more the story of how this technology has helped, I don't know, change your business or something like that, just not a flat out commercial pitch. And they're normally quite obvious to spot as a reviewer.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, just really echoing what Beth said. Like, it's one of those, unfortunately, it's a little bit more common than I'd like it to be. And it's sometimes really easy to fall into the mode, especially if you're, working for a large company and they're encouraging, as part of your yearly goals, speaker submissions. It can be a little easy to it is possible, like I said, to kind of thread the needle. The big idea is, as a speaker at a conference, your goal is to provide learning and I'm going to say the word value. It's not quite what I want to say, but the general idea of you want to provide something to the audience, and a sales pitch is not what they're looking for. They're not looking to sign up. It's okay to sit here and say, hey, I work on Google Cloud. Here, I was doing this interesting project and I just so happened to use Google Cloud. That's not a sales pitch. That's saying, I work there. That's the reason why I used it. But the topic of the talk is not how to use Google Cloud. The topic of the talk is whatever it is that you're talking about using, and you just so happen to use this as your example. Like that's okay. But like, be conscious of that. Like most people you're going to be fine. Don't worry about stepping in it, but just keep an eye on it. Make sure your topic is not the thing that your company sells.
Yeah. And I find you can even make a joke out of it or something too. Like you can have a little fun with it, but just like both Daniel and Beth said, keep it on the topic of the story or the problem that you're solving, those sorts of things. So I mean, speaking of stories, I mean, I think we could say you want your content to be engaging. So, telling some sort of narrative is a good idea. But I think we've all kind of seen a lot of these, this is my story in tech talks, which we would maybe just advise against in this area. Keep this, have an interesting story to tell, but don't make it your life story, I think is maybe the point here. But Dan, what are your thoughts on like how to tell a story and some do's and don'ts there?
Yeah, so this is one that's a little near and dear to my heart. I'm a big fan of narratives, and part of what helps make your talk more approachable is if you kind of bring in personal experiences, especially experiences where you failed or you're flawed. Like, people connect more with the human side of you. Like, hey, I tried this thing and it blew up in my face. I'm going to connect with you more of that talk than I tried this thing and it turns out I'm perfect. I can't connect with that. I'm not perfect. On the same topic, though, sometimes there can be a tendency, and I have this tendency as well when I'm thinking about some talks, to be like, my life entering, programming, or like, I personally have been playing around with, I've done a lot with organizing conferences and meetups, and I've been trying to figure out how to give a talk that isn't my time participating in community conferences. Like, I haven't quite come to that yet. The way I like to think of it is you can think of like your personal anecdotes. You're bringing your personality and your story and things that you've seen, those kind of things. Bringing that in is like herbs. Like, it's flavor. It adds depth to your talk. It makes it easier to connect with. But nobody wants to eat a salad made entirely of basil leaves. That's just way too much. Like, sprinkle a little bit on top and it enhances the dish.
Yeah, I totally agree. What about you, Beth?
Yeah, just same as Dan mentioned, kind of it's good to add flavor with a bit of life story, but just telling your life story from day one to where you are now.
Yeah, I think too, in terms of like a story, a lot of times I'll look at my talk and I'll try to think about like, intro, outro, and then kind of the content in the middle. And I do sometimes work backwards, like, what's the takeaway from what I'm trying to share here? Where do I want to land? How do I want to make sure that message gets across clearly and in an interesting way, and then kind of work backwards from there too. So I do encourage folks to think about, your talk as something of a story, beginning, middle, and end, and make sure you have your all's well that ends well, right? So make sure you got your ending good and stick the landing, right? So what about, technical talks, or how technical do you think you need to be, Beth, when you're writing a talk, or what suggestions do you have for folks in that area?
I think first is to consider the audience and the audience that's at your conference. For example, in my case, I go to a lot of Node.js specific conferences. So some, extremely detailed technical Node.js content does actually fit quite well there. But on the other hand, at some larger, bigger conferences, you will have people there who may not be familiar with the subject in such detail. So actually a good way of, having a high level talk that's not necessarily technical is great. And to be honest, when I go to conferences, it's quite nice to have a bit of a mix between, hey, I want to sit in and learn this deep technical thing in this session, but actually now I'd like to go see a more community focused talk, or it's all useful content and it's just, I guess, what you feel comfortable talking about.
Yeah, what's your experience been, Daniel?
Yeah, so the technical talks are, I can enjoy them. There's a mix that you have to figure out the right level. It's like Beth mentioned, know your audience. So obviously if you're coming to, OpenJS World, you probably don't need to explain what JavaScript or V8 is to the audience. I would assume that they know. So there are things that you can skimp on a little bit. You also have 30 minutes. 30 minutes is not a lot of time to go super deep into something technical. Some of the advice I've given in the past boils down to, it's okay to sit here and say, pick certain topics or certain words and definitions and maybe mention them, but also say, I'm going to wave a magic wand over this. There's a lot more depth into this, and this is not the talk to get into. It's really good to kind of like time box and limit your focus on your talk. So if you are going to give a technical talk, to say, I'm only going to focus on this one, I'm going to focus on Node.js streams. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about promises, imports with ES6. I'm not going to, they're going to be there. You're going to see them. Don't worry about them. I'm just going to focus on this, and then provide some resources afterwards. You can think of your 30 minutes as a way of going like you're providing, I like to think of a 30-minute technical talk, if you're going to give a technical talk, is your goal at the end of the talk is to give the audience a glossary and a map of things that they didn't know they needed to Google search beforehand. So that if they go, I'm very interested in digging into this subject later, they can think back to the talk and go, okay, I remember they mentioned this, that, and the other. That's what I should go Google for. And what you've done, the value you've brought to them is you've completely shortened that research phase by giving them kind of a general map of what is the lay of the land, what do I need to dig into, as well as they now associate your name as, if they know you through a Slack channel, they can reach out to you and go, oh, hey, Beth, you mentioned this really interesting thing. Is there something I can read, look into? Fantastic.
Yeah, that's good advice. And then having some of that context, that they kind of have an idea, but they can research some more. And yeah, that makes sense. That first talk that I talked about earlier, the one where Dom was correcting me, I remember that my practice was at a meetup, and a few people came up to me afterwards and was like, that was a good talk, but you totally went over my head in this area and this area. And I didn't understand what you like. It would be, what did you mean when you were talking about this? I don't know. Anyway, it made me realize that I went into that, especially because it was my first talk, thinking that I had to be the smartest person on this topic and write my talk accordingly. But I realized, and this was great feedback for a practice session, which I recommend folks, if you get an opportunity to practice on, some of your colleagues or friends or at a meetup or something, please do so. It's very helpful. But I realized that I needed to I didn't need to dumb the talk down, but it's sort of like, when you're in meetings and people are throwing around acronyms or whatever, take a moment and just say, oh, this means this, or I don't mean to kind of gloss over this, but, just a quick note here that this is this. So I think it is kind of a balance of like what Beth said, know your audience and playing to both the really smart people and the people who are maybe new to the subject, and finding that sweet spot in there.
Yeah, one thing to add there is in my experience, when being on a program committee, we often are looking to get a variety of content at different levels. For example, sometimes you can tag your content as suitable for beginners, intermediate, or expert. And when they're building up the program, they will try to balance that out. So it's not all expert topics, it's a mixture, so people can choose between what suits them.
Yeah.
I have an anecdote on this specifically as well that I love to tell people about. I remember there was a day that it clicked for me. I think it was, I can't remember who was giving the talk, but it was a talk at Queen's JS up here in New York, and it was a dev talking about the project that they did in like their kind of like final project at a boot camp, and they're going through it. So obviously this is a very junior developer speaking to an fairly mixed audience, and and I'm sitting, I'm watching this talk, and I've got 13 14 years of experience in this industry, and I walked away with so much. Specifically, they were talking about, we went to other experienced developers and asked for feedback, and they gave this kind of feedback, and it was valuable, this wasn't valuable, as well as they talked about some of the problems they had. And it was so valuable for me because I realized, like, oh, wow, it's been a long time since I've been a junior. I have forgotten what it was like to be new and what kind of problems they had. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh, this is really good to take away. This will improve my ability to mentor juniors at work, to interact with other people. And I just found that extremely valuable. Even as an audience member where maybe I already know the technical stuff, I'm seeing it through a different lens, and it gives me an ability to kind of empathize better with my coworkers.
Yeah, I guess that might be kind of a good segue into a tip that I always try to give people if they're stuck for content and stuck for an idea to submit. You don't have to have, say someone's already done a talk on the topic you plan to give. That shouldn't stop you from submitting, because you can always give your own unique spin on it. So just because someone submitted a TypeScript talk or an introduction to TypeScript talk, don't think that you don't have any extra value to add. And this goes for blog posts just as much as for talks. You could add your own spin. For example, if you had a history of a Java developer, you could present the talk as TypeScript from a Java developer's perspective. So there are definitely ways where, even though the content's been done before or been done at a different level, there's definitely ways you can submit it with your own spin on it.
Yeah. All good tips. Yeah, and I think too, like when I'm learning something, I try to take notes, because I'm probably not the only person learning this right now, and I might be able to share like my fresh experience to whatever problem I'm looking at. This is a great conversation. I want to make sure I touch on a couple of things here as we kind of make sure we work through our talking points here. But like, when you're submitting a talk, do take advantage of your character limit. Don't if you have more room to kind of expand on what it is you want to talk about, or why you think it's important, make sure you get that in there. We're going to be looking at this just really dry and without any of the context that you may have in your head. So please feel free. I even oftentimes, I don't know if this is good advice or not, but I make a little joke in there. If there's like, is there anything we should know about your talk? I try to be fun and inject a little personality into there. I don't know if you either of you do as well. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so if there is an additional comment box and you feel anything's relevant, make use of it. I know sometimes I've done submitted a talk that I was slightly worried might be perceived as a product pitch, even though that wasn't the intent. I actually went in the additional notes box and was like, by the way, I'm going to focus on X, Y, and Z in this talk. It is not product pitch, just so that when the reviewers are coming to it, they have the additional context they need to make a good call.
Yeah.
I like having, like, I wouldn't be speaking and doing conferences if I didn't have fun. And so it's good to have a little bit of fun, like, take the prompt seriously, give us all the details you can, but have fun with it. Show the selection committee who you are as a person. Like, honestly, worst case scenario, you give us a chuckle while we're slogging through hundreds of submissions,
Yep. We might remember you. For sure. So, don't be light on details, as we're talking about. Not, we're not looking for talks that are only on OpenJS projects. So, don't let that be some sort of constraints. Don't worry about getting it exactly right. Like we said earlier, if we have suggestions, we will reach out, or, we can definitely help you craft a great talk. And don't worry about things that have been talked about before. There's always kind of new perspectives, and not everything can be brand new. So let's.
I want to real quick. I just wanted to expand on that, talking about don't worry about covering a topic that's been done before. One thing that is also probably going through some people's heads is this is a large OpenJS World conference. There's not an unlikely chance that you want to give a talk on a topic where the author of that thing is going to be at the conference. That's okay. Go ahead and submit that talk. That project owner, that project creator, A, is probably tired of talking about it all the time, is very happy to have somebody else to talk about it. B, can probably get a lot of valuable insight from, oh, I didn't realize that people looked at my project that way. That could be particularly valuable. And C, you might make a new friend. You might find, that author of that project that you gave a talk about shows up and goes, I really like that. Thank you for giving that talk. Let's go grab a glass of water and chit chat over it. You don't know. I'm making no promises, but you should not let that stop you.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, the talk that I keep mentioning, that first talk, I realized that the person who wrote the project that I was part of my talk lived in the town that the event was at. And so I reached out to him, and we went and had a beer beforehand, and I got some thoughts from the creator before I got up there, which was fun. So thinking about like good talk ideas, there are a variety of things, and we've talked about a bunch of them, but just to kind of throw out some more, ideas to kind of spark your, if you're thinking about things, case studies is a good thing to talk about if you have any sort of relevant context there. Trends for sure. I mean, one of the things that's super important right now that I know is on everybody's mind is security, in terms of like trends and stuff. I mean, I guess I wouldn't really call that a trend per se, but it's top of mind for sure, very topical. Dan, Beth, do you either of you have anything you want to share there? I guess I should pick one of you when I do this, right?
Yeah. We're talking about kind of like the varieties of talks. Like you're going on a list of case studies, tips and tricks. Like these are all, I think especially for people who aren't used to submitting talks, like the easiest place to start is to maybe start thinking of some case studies and then start teasing out details from those case studies. I personally find that I like, when we talk about kinds of talks, I like tips and tricks type talks, like hey, listen, here's a couple of interesting things to take away with you. I like things that are like, practical workflow improvements, things to look at, because I'm always on the lookout for, as an attendee, I'm always on the lookout for new things to consider, new things to research. So those are kind of like good types of talks for you to think about, and the structures that we like.
Yeah. So those are some ideas about, talk ideas. Theory-based talks are great if that's, something that you're thinking about, workflows, process improvements, things like that. And then also, thinking about perhaps a matrix here, some of the tracks that we have, testing, automation, CI/CD, DevOps kind of related stuff, security, like I mentioned before, dev work, community talks are great. We definitely like to have some of those in there. Performance, is another great area. But again, I'll highlight, like, security is going to be a big topic, I think, throughout the year for not just this event, but all the work that we're doing. Let's talk about the review process. How does the review process work? Beth, you were with us last year. Do you want to kind of give a quick overview of what?
Yeah, I think last year we had a tool that would populate all of the kind of abstracts into it, and initially you would see the abstract, and then you get an option to rate it. And we, as reviewers, we are given like metrics to review according to. For example, there may be we may give it a rating based on originality or applicability to our audience. So there are a few different factors that we rate on. So we initially look at the abstract, review on that, and go through the whole series. Later on in the process, we will look at look at submissions as a whole, see which one's rated towards the top, and actually from there we will do more of an abstract approach to building up the agenda. It's not just a case of we take the top 10 talks that rated the highest. We really do think about how is this talk going to fit in this track? Will it sit nicely with these other talks in the track, and that kind of approach.
Yeah, and overall, we try to be really thoughtful about how we put the whole program together. You know, we talked about diversity before, and of course, diversity is a variety of things to consider there. You know, and first-time speakers, trying to grow the community that we're building here. You know, different topics. We really try to get a good mix of a variety of different things to put together a really exciting event. I know that Dan, you know, you have so much experience in putting events together and conferences and meetups and whatnot. What are some of your thoughts about, you know, choosing a good talk and how you work through it?
Yeah, it's really basically like every talk review setup has basically been exactly kind of what Beth described here. It's we start with kind of a I'll use the phrase semi-blind. Like we look through the abstracts, we go, hey, I just on a raw basis, you know, who likes what, and we try to bring, you know, you try to bring as many reviewers into the committee as possible, just to get a wide variety of. Some people will be really into one talk and others won't be, but we try to average that out. And then once we kind of get that list, we then kind of open the lens up a little bit more and go, okay, well, like what fits? What, you know, what works together? You know, sometimes we might find ourselves in a situation where we all highly rated a bunch of talks that are effectively the same talk. And we can't run the same talk 5 times. Attendees are going to show up and go, well, why did I come here? It's the same talk 5 times by 5 different people. So, you know, I mention that especially to anybody who's going to go through the CFP process. You know, many of you are going to get, you know, rejections, and some of those are like, they're good talks. It just, you know, there's either just a lot of it or just like the program as a whole. You know, you should continue to take that idea, especially if you really liked it, take that idea to other conferences, you know, the CFP submissions aren't exclusive to us. But yeah, it really boils down to, we're looking at the conference as a whole, and trying to like thread that needle of again, to reemphasize those first-time speakers getting in some of the names that we know that, like, we think about devs that, you know, may not be in as, you know, attendees that don't live in as active of community areas. Like, you know, they don't live in the Bay Area, Seattle, New York, so they don't interact a lot with the local tech scene. This conference is their chance to come in and interact. So we want to make sure that they get both exposure to people that they want to hear from, that they respect and like, as well as from new people to expand their worldview and kind of introduce them to a wider audience. So,
yeah, just to add, related to something you mentioned, in the case where we have maybe highly rated 2 talks on the same topic, that is the kind of situation where we would reach out to one of the submitters and say, hey, we've already got a very similar talk. Is it possible that you could have a slightly different angle on this, which would allow us to have both talks at the event? So that's the kind of feedback we sometimes give.
Yeah, and I guess that to me gets back to the whole thing of like, we're, you know, really trying to be thoughtful about how we put this whole event together and make it a great event for everyone involved, and the speakers and the audience and whatnot. Speaking of making a great event for everyone involved, you know, we need to mention that all speakers are required to adhere to our code of conduct. I believe that all attendees are required to adhere to our code of conduct, of course. You know, that's the contributors covenant. You know, you'll find that on our website and on our GitHub repos. So definitely take a look at that. That's something that we are serious about, and you know, have moderation guidelines and reporting structures, and it's definitely, it's not lip service. This is important. We also highly recommend that speakers take our online inclusive speaker orientation course that's offered by the Linux Foundation. And so that's another great resource that we have and helps you to create a talk that is inclusive in its language and whatnot. So definitely something that we offer and encourage folks to take advantage of. We're kind of getting near a place to wrap up. I want to get your closing thoughts in a moment, but Dan, Beth, I'll go to you first. Dan, do you have any other thoughts about resources that people who are new to speaking might consider?
Yeah, so if you're new to speaking, the resources I constantly drive people to is if you have a local meetup that's running in your area. I know it's strange times, a lot of meetups have had to shut down. If there's a local meetup or if there's an online type meetup, go participate in those. If there's a Toastmasters, consider one of those as well. Participate, join, find the Slack groups that have, there's obviously the OpenJS Foundation Slack that you can join. There's other Slack groups with other people around, bounce ideas off of, and then reach out. It's one of those, it can feel intimidating. It can feel like these things are, the people giving talks, they're professionals. Well, maybe one or two of them might be, but most of them are just a random person who just made a dumb decision one day, 10 years ago to get up on stage and speak and just can't seem to get off. And so reach out. I do this. I absolutely love doing this. When people reach out to me and ask for tips and advice, I love sitting down with them, asking them about what they do, helping them refine their ideas. I really do see an extremely strong value in at least giving one talk at a conference. You give it once, you hate it, great. Never do it again. But at least do it once and just give it just pull the trigger, just do it.
Yep. Yeah, I concur. If you have any interest in speaking, just give it a shot, figure out a way to try it out. And most people I talk to, once they do it once, they're like, oh, I want to do that again. I want to get better at that. I want to keep doing that. Beth, do you have any resources or suggestions?
Not too different. So yeah, if you do have nerves doing a talk, definitely try meetups or even maybe a virtual meetup. I know some of those are happening at the moment. That's really the best way, just to get familiar, get used to talking to people, speaking, running through your content.
And I'll, we're pretty much at time, so I'll take this opportunity to, I guess I'll say a couple of calls to action before we kind of wrap up with some closing thoughts. We meet regularly. If you have an interest in helping craft the event, come and hang out with us, join the program committee. Again, openjsf.org/collaborate has a variety of ways to get involved in the work that we do, including joining the Slack org and getting in that CFP mentorship channel. And if that's something you're interested in, we'd be happy to help you there. Obviously this whole exercise is to encourage folks to submit their CFPs and to be helpful in that regard. So, definitely go to openjsworld.com, click on the submit a talk button, and we'd love to see what you'd like to share, and would be happy to help you work on that. Beth, I'll come back to you for your closing thoughts. We'll go around the horn and call it a wrap.
Yeah, sure. Just to say, I'm sure there are a lot of people who have things that would be very interesting for us to hear about. So please have a think and try and submit something. If you are very, very nervous and it's your first ever talk, you could consider doing a 5-minute lightning talk, just as a way of getting up on stage, giving your first talk and sharing some content.
Daniel?
Yeah, I think the closing thoughts are just encourage, if you don't want to submit a talk, number one, that's wrong. You should submit a talk. But I know you work with somebody. I know that there's somebody that you're close to, that a friend that did something really interesting, and you think to yourself, man, I really, really, you should give a talk on that. Everybody should know. I know that you have a friend you want to support. Use this as an opportunity to go, hey, I heard about this OpenJS World thing. They've got the CFP. You should submit. I hope that your friends do that to you, but really just kind of reach out, encourage people. We're not going to bite. And I think you'll end up having a lot more fun than you think you will. And there are all sorts of people who are willing to sit down with you, talk you through whatever nerves, whatever questions you have. Like, this is, you know, these community conferences, we're all volunteers. You know, I'm not getting paid money to do any of this. I do it because I like it. And so let me like what I do by helping you.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point, Daniel. And I think, you know, I just wanted to comment too on just how, you know, I think that this is a special event. It's been a couple of years since we've gotten together, but I think even regardless, you know, the Node.js Interactive, Node plus JS Interactive, and now OpenJS World, it's always been sort of a flagship event for me that I'm always excited about and looking forward to, you know, seeing old friends, making new friends, having fun, learning. It's really the event that I look forward to every year. And so I'm excited to get back together in person. I'm excited to perhaps meet any of you folks who might be watching and submitting a talk. And like Daniel was saying, you know, feel free to reach out. And even at the event, you know, the hallway track is my favorite. You know, stop us in the hallway and chat more. If you have thoughts about your talk or whatever, you know, that's game too. But in general, it's a great community, great event, and I really look forward to it and to seeing old friends and making new ones. So yeah, we're kind of at time. I think this has been a really great conversation. Thank you, Daniel and Bethany for joining us, and thanks for watching.